Hey there, Alex Kidman with my quick video review of the Nokia 5.4. This is the latest in HMD's now long-running series of Nokia branded phones aimed at the more affordable market, and it is of course a successor to the Nokia 5.3. It's only just a successor. And look, in the past I've really quite liked HMD's Nokia phones. They've represented really good value, the inclusion of Android One's been a big plus. And look, generally this is true of the Nokia 5.4. Still, I'm a little disappointed. Let me explain why. So let's have a look at the design. So the model that I've got here is the Dusk model. Dusk in this case is purple, but it's plastic body phone, and what that means is it attracts fingerprints like crazy. You have a relatively high-mounted rear fingerprint sensor. It works okay, but the size of the phone means if you've got smaller hands, a bit tricky to get to and a bit tricky not to smudge the lens at the back. It's got a 6.39-inch 720p display. Now, 720p in this price range is not super uncommon, but it could have stretched a little further, maybe to 1080p at this price point. You do at least get a headphone jack at the top of the phone. I like phones with headphone jacks. On the camera front, well, you've technically got a quad camera lens. Sort of. This is a very, very simple trick that lots of mid-range and budget phone makers engage in, because what you've really got is a decent enough primary sensor. So the primary sensor is 48 megapixels. There's a 5 megapixel ultra-wide sensor, then a 2 megapixel macro sensor, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor. Obviously, the depth sensor you're never going to shoot with. Every single phone of late seems to have that 2 megapixel macro sensor, and they all shoot fairly ordinary photos at best. You're going to struggle to get all that much decent in a macro sense out of this. So it's not so great. The ultra-wide is okay, the 48 megapixel primary is okay, but that's about as far as I'd take it. They'll do digital zoom, for example, but even at kind of 8 times, it does not look great. It's not really recommended. Now, is this better or worse than anything in the category? Basically, it's dead average. It's about what you'd expect and no better. And while HMD haven't produced all that many real knockout camera phones, again, I just feel like it could have done better. I didn't feel like this was a big punch above what the 5.3 did, even though its camera specifications were a little better. It's in the processor, though, that the 5.4 represents this really curious kickback from the 5.3. So, the Nokia 5.3 ran on a Snapdragon 665, pretty standard for a phone of its type at its price range at the time. The 5.4 runs on a Snapdragon 662. Now, that is technically newer silicon, but it's a processor that runs at a lower clock speed. And the practical upshot of this is that the 5.3 actually benchmarks slightly higher than the 5.4. It's slightly faster. Not so much so you'd notice it, but isn't the point of getting a newer phone, an upgraded phone, that it should be a little bit better, a little bit faster than the phone that came before it? Because that's just not the case for the Nokia 5.4. It's okay again within its range, it's basically just dead average. And I think you should probably punch for a little bit more than dead average when you're buying a phone, even when you're buying a lower cost phone. The one big secret sauce benefit that, of course, the Nokia 5.4 has is that it's an Android One device. Now, what that means is that it'll get at least 2 years worth of Android upgrades and at least 3 years of security upgrades. It ships with Android 10, but it will go through to at least Android 12, according to what HMD Global has said. And of course, with those Android updates, it could get some performance boosts, but again, the older ones will as well, so that's still a little bit variable. Android One remains a really good key reason to buy a Nokia phone. The other area where the Nokia 5.4 slightly outshoots the 5.3 is in battery life. Now, they both have the same battery capacity, 4,000 milliamps, but in my tests, the 5.4 slightly outpaces the 5.3 when it comes to preserving battery life. And what that means, of course, is that for most users, this is a phone which will easily do a day, 2 days maybe if you're a lighter user, and it does do a little bit better than the 5.3. I wouldn't upgrade from a 5.3 just to get that little battery life boost, but here at least there's some sense in bouncing to that 662 processor over the 665. So, should you buy the Nokia 5.4? Well, look, if you've got a 5.3, no, I don't think you should. And honestly, if you can score a 5.3 at a decent price, compared to the 5.4, I'd still go for it. You won't see quite as many Android updates, of course, because it's a slightly older phone, but in this price bracket, you rarely see them outside of Nokia phones anyway. Ultimately, look, this is an average phone, and I'm a little bit disappointed with it because it should be so much more. I think Nokia can push a little bit harder than this, could have provided a little bit better value. It's not a bad phone, it's just a deeply average one. Anyway, that's my take. What do you think of the Nokia 5.4? Are you keen on it? Do you have one? Any observations? Anything you'd like to know? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe.